Welcome back to the Royal Family Podcast. Austin, how the hell are you?
Man, I'm dressed for business. We got some business to tend to today. I'm doing all right otherwise, but there's some things I'm happy and some things I'm upset about today, man.
Nice.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Well, let's just get into it. Do you recall sending a text on May 6th, 2026, along the lines of crap right after the Royals lost that night?
I think you're jogging my memory a little bit. Yeah, I believe I did send that text message to you.
Yeah, so we had a big winning streak. I don't necessarily remember how big, but it was large. Let me tell you what, it was large. And we got within half a game of first. And if we would have won that night, it was probably against Cleveland, if I'm not mistaken. If we would have won that night, we would have taken first, right?
Yeah.
And I was really nervous about that game because even though we were in a good position, we had just won a bunch in a row, a loss really shouldn't bother me that much. I remembered last year. And I remembered every time we got either a game or a half game of whether it was first, which didn't happen that often, or whether it was a wild card spot, whatever, we typically lost right before getting to that wild card spot, and then we went on a massive losing streak. So you may remember in this text that I'm referring to, I said, the losing streak begins. You responded, tomorrow is a new day. I said yes, the second day of the losing streak. And Austin, since that day, the Royals have been 3-9. I'm not proud that I was right. I'm not happy about it. But this is the team the Royals are. They go on streaks. They get just almost to the spot they need to be. And if they don't get there, then they lose every game for the next forever. And it's very frustrating, I'd like to add. But it's just how I thought I'd introduce this podcast because honestly, we're not going to be talking a whole lot about how bad the Royals are playing. We're just going to hope they get better as they come into a homestand and they're 13-10 at home. So I'm excited to hopefully get back within some games of where we need to be.
I hope so too. I think it's going to be the little details, especially in this upcoming homestand, because that losing streak, like you mentioned, 3-9 since May 6th, a lot of little details that, let's just say, didn't pan out for the Royals in one way or another.
Yeah, for sure. So this week we're going to start off with talking about Hawaiian Bros.
For the audience who may not be aware, because whatever happened is no longer happening, could you please elaborate on why do we care about the Hawaiian Bros in this Kansas City Royals podcast?
Yes, so here's what went down. Hawaiian Bros so generously was offering a free plate lunch. It's like a full lunch, some meat, some rice, some macaroni salad type thing. Free plate lunch for Kansas City fans every time the Royals scored 6 or more runs at home. Now, you'd have to imagine, I'm not actually sure if they were doing this from the beginning of the year or if they did it after. I think they did it in the middle of the season, and you'd have to imagine they probably saw how bad the Royals were at scoring runs and were like, let's capitalize on this. We can look good by offering free plate lunches, but barely ever have to do it because the Royals aren't going to score like that. So naturally, The Royals scored 6 or more runs at home 5 games in a row against the Orioles and the Angels. What are you thinking, Austin? Like, this is pretty exciting, right?
It is exciting. Because, I mean, you got fans getting free food, Hawaiian Bros getting more pedestrian traffic. It's a win all the way around, isn't it?
100%. And what a great time, especially, we're going through, you could argue, some challenging times right now. So, like, so great that this corporate or this player in the corporate world is willing to, give back. So naturally, Hawaiian Bros immediately after this 6-game stretch, six game stretch, rescinded their offer, said, we didn't really mean that. We're just kidding. And changed it to, if the Royals score 6 or more runs at home, you get a buy one, get one plate lunch. So now you have to buy a whole lunch to get a free plate lunch. Still somewhat of a deal, but now anybody who may have gone there who couldn't afford food sometimes maybe can no longer indulge in this type of offer. So that makes me want to bring up a little word that I like to call not a word, but a little thing that I like to call corporate greed. I think this is extremely out of touch. Like, legitimately, people are starving out there. So you created a way for free food, and then you strip it away immediately. And I think, like, if it was actually, the reason they gave is that it was, like, causing too much traffic at their stores. They weren't able to deal with all the traffic. If that was actually the case, let's go back a little bit. First of all, it was only ever available to customers who were already reward members, like before the games took place. I'm not doubting that they had a lot of traffic, but there's not enough people that are Hawaiian Bros reward members for this to be a gigantic problem that you, like, can't recover from. Let me offer, like, a way they could have helped, or a way they could have fixed this better if they actually needed to. They could have simply said, this is too much, it's causing problems at our store, so we're going to spread it out a bit. No longer is it going to be the Royals score 6 or more runs, and the next day everybody gets a free plate lunch who's a rewards member. Now it's going to be the Royals scored 6 or more runs, but we're dealing with a lot of traffic recently, so we're going to wait until, like, a week, 2 weeks, whatever date in the future, and we're going to do the free plate lunches then. We just need to be able to plan. We need to be able to get, our bearings together so that we can provide this when we can. And that would have been fine to me. And just one more thing to put in there. Promotions like this really don't hurt a company's bottom line. That's why they do it. That's why Chick-fil-A has free chicken day. Chipotle has free burrito day. It's a drop in a bucket to these companies, and it is completely worth it for how good their brand looks for offering those free meals and how many people will sign up to be rewards members so they can access those free meals in the future. It's just straight up a greed thing to me. And, like, the one thing I can feel sympathetic towards is, like, the minimum wage workers that work there having to manage so much more traffic, but you just have more people work on that day, or you just hire more people. You prepare yourself for the offer that you decided to offer. Why did it sound like you just got hit with a lightning bolt?
That's thunder, dude. It's currently storming in Kansas City right now, and, well, what better way to segue into this segment than to talk about the unveiling of those storm kits that the current unveiled this past Friday against the Houston Dash. They were amazing color gradient that they had. They were showing it off, looking great. And, well, the Current played great as well. They won 3-0 against the Dash. She's inevitable. Temwa Shawinga showing why she's won MVP 2 straight years. Michelle Cooper showing why she's one of the best 1v1 attacking wingers in the league. Lorena's seemed like she's gotten back to her old self. She's reacting instinctively. She's trusting in her defense, I feel like, a little bit more. I think we know how the season started off. We had a lot of injuries. We were trying to figure out all the pieces with a lot of depth players and new signings. I think the Current that we've seen these last 3 games since we lost to the Washington Spirit back in April, I think this is more of who we are and who we should be. Now, is it perfect? No. Is there still room to grow? Yes. Do I think that we will still continue to strive for that and hopefully get better as a whole as the season goes along? Absolutely. But I did want to make note of it. Since that loss, that 4-0 loss to the Spirit, Current are 3-0. The last 2 games, we've scored 6 goals, conceded 0 against both the Chicago Stars and Houston Dash. And Temwa Shawinga, TemVP as we know her around these parts, she scored 5 goals in the last 2 games. She had that hat trick against Chicago, followed it up with another 2 goals against Houston Dash. So she seems like she's back in the groove of things. And I couldn't be any more excited for kind of where we're headed as a team right now. The only, I guess, concern that I have at this point, there's a couple things. First off being Dabinia and her meniscus injury, which Chris Armis so expertly explained to us all, the differences between arthroscopic meniscus, meniscectomy versus meniscus repair. So that was a fun little anatomy lesson. We appreciate that, Chris. So it seems as though they opted for a repair, I'm guessing. I don't know. I wasn't in the surgery. I don't even know if they did have a surgery. It's hard to get medical information about these players, which I get it. It's up to the NWSL and the clubs and how they disclose information. I'm not knocking that. But we really can only go off of what Chris says or doesn't say. So it seems like they're doing the more, I guess, beneficial option for Dabinia long term in terms of maintaining her knee cartilage and things like that. As a result, she'll be out a little bit longer. But this could be a bit of a blessing in a disguise because if we get a fully healthy Dabinia towards the end of the season, kind of save her up, get her ready for the playoffs where she can dominate, that'll be good for us. We know how last season ended, the injuries we had, and how this team looks completely different without the star players playing. So hopefully it'll pay off for us in the end.
Let me ask real quick, is it a concern to you? We're going off right now, we're clicking on all cylinders, and we're about to go into quote-unquote international break for the World Cup. Is it at all concerning to you that we're going to have to suddenly stop in the middle of all this momentum and start up in a month or 2, I forget how long, probably a month, and possibly have another slow start out the gate because we haven't really had that much experience with all this momentum? And if that's the case, do we need to really put our foot on the gas right now, get as many wins as we can right before that break?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I would say, yes, I have some concern, of course. When things are clicking, the last thing you want to do is stop playing because the chemistry's flowing, the goals are flowing, the defensive attention is at an all-time high. But we have to keep in mind, this is something very typical of the NWSL during the summer months. It just so happens that this year it lines up that the World Cup is going on and it's here. And kind of looking at the schedule, we have about a 27-day break between the current's last league game, which is on May 30th, and then they have the NWSL Challenge Cup on June 26th against Gotham, which pits the NWSL champion against the NWSL Supporter Shield winner from the past season. So that'll be their first action after about 26, 27 days. So am I concerned? Yes, but also you still have the second half of the season to kind of regroup, get things together, and make sure that you continue to go up in the standings. So right now, the current sit at 6th place. Of course, yeah.
It's called the table.
Well, sorry, Google says the standings, so I'm going off of what Google says. But yes, in the league table, San Diego Wave, they started off the season 3 straight wins. They're still on the top of the league with 21 points. Current aren't too far behind, even though we're in 6th place. We have 15 points on the season, so 6-point differential. We're still going to play them at least one more time this season. So again, I'm not concerned about our table positioning at this point in time. It's still relatively early, and there's a lot of movement that can be had. So I think the main thing is finishing these next few games out strong. And that really brings me to my next concern, which is the run of matches we have in the next couple of weeks. So between today, which is May 18th, and May 30th, the current have 3 games. So we have a midweek game against Angel FC. We'll be there at BMO Stadium. Then we come back home to face the Portland Thorns. Portland always plays us tough. We know they've got 1/3 of triple espresso with Sophia Wilson. They're always a 3-headed monster up there. Oh my gosh.
They're also first.
They're seemingly a 3-headed monster over there with Wilson back. They've got a youngster in Raylan Turner, and then of course Olivia Moultrie. And then May 30th, we're going to be home again against Nichelle Prince and the Boston Legacy. So we've got to try our best to finish these last 3 games out strongly and try to further build ourselves up with that momentum. And I think it's going to be key, especially with this midweek game, is how do our depth pieces fill in? Because Temwa may or may not even play in this midweek game. We have to remember she's still coming back to full fitness from that injury. Michelle Cooper.
Well,
Let's use a
bit stronger of language, because Timwa still hasn't played a full game since coming back from injury. So
she has not.
At least in my opinion, if Timwa does play, it's blatant negligence to me.
That's fair. It would definitely be risky, and I would say we really shouldn't play Temwa. Angel City should be respected, don't get me wrong, but they're in probably one of the worst runs of form that they've had in a really long time, if not ever. In the last 5 games, they've had 4 losses and 1 draw. So you're playing against a team, and they're on roughly 48 hours less rest for a midweek game. So all players are going to be fatigued in terms of travel, in terms of time between the last game. But I think you're going to have a weakened Angel City side. So I think the Current really need to take advantage of this. I wouldn't play Temwa at all. I wouldn't play Michelle Cooper at all. I would rely on our depth pieces, those backups, to be able to hopefully get the job done. And then, if need be, you can bring in a super sub, whether that be Michelle or Ali or Croy. But personally, I would not start any of those players. And make sure that everybody's ready back at CPKC next week against the Portland Thorns. I think that's the best way to attack it from a minute management profile and in terms of giving those backup players playtime, because at some point your backups are going to have to play. This is a very long season. Once you come back from the break, it is a very tough summer. We're going to be playing a lot of games in July, a lot of games in August, hottest time of the year. So players are going to need to be rotated, and players need to get experience. So what better time than a midweek game? I remember what happened when we did that midweek game against Chicago. Didn't end well. But hey, you've got to keep playing. You've got to keep playing. You got to figure it out. And I'm sorry, that was a midweek game against Seattle when they beat us 3-0. But still, you're going to have to rotate players, get players in the team, get them to have that experience and cohesiveness together. There's no other way to make it through a long season like this. You can't run the same 11 every single game. And when you think about that, one player that we've seen kind of emerge these last few games is Lainey Rouse. She's seemingly taken over that right back position in recent times over Ellie Bravo Young. So a midweek game like this, whether Ellie starts on the left or the right, it'll give her an opportunity to kind of show what she has and prove herself to Chris Armas and the rest of the training staff that she deserves to be getting minutes, whether it's coming in to sub for Izzy or starting instead of Lainey Rouse. So I'll be interesting to see kind of what happens in this game from kind of that standpoint. That's kind of the one position duel across the first 11 that I'm really looking at to see kind of what happens over these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, fresh off we at the NWSL lack transparency extension as well. So happy for Lainey. I've really seen recently Lorena step up in a much bigger way. And I mean, I think she's had some more help on defense, so that's a part of it. But she's just been acting with so much confidence, and that is really great to see because we really only do have one keeper that we would start. Unlike the Royals, who for the last couple of weeks have had multiple catchers starting, 3 even starting. And, you know, I was going to do a whole segment about, I was going to call it catcher chaos, and, oh, this is why Carter behind the plate is really hurting us, and Salvi needs to come back, and is Salvi dealing with hip soreness still? Are they just trying to throw Carter into the fire and have him learn? I don't know. Luckily, we got some transparency finally on that. So I'm not really going to talk about all of that. I have just some quicker things that I want to point out. So it was the injury stuff, the reason that Salvi wasn't catching for so many days in a row and Carter was. On top of the hip stuff that we knew about, he also had some groin stuff, which we didn't know about, because apparently the hip stuff is stuff he's been dealing with for 10 plus years. That's just sometimes it agitates him, sometimes it flares up, sometimes it doesn't, but the groin stuff is new and really what seems to actually have been keeping him from playing behind the plate. So I just want to point out a few things that happened over this 3 to 4 week stretch. We saw Carter go on a massive slump, which obviously we have an extremely small sample size of his career, but it was unusual considering how good he looked last year, how he looks like the best player on the team this year to start the season. But it just so happened to line up exactly with when he was catching every day. And big league catching is a lot. Big league catching is different than anything any high school, college, minor league player has ever experienced. And you have to always be planning, putting together, being a part of putting together the game plan, having all these things you have to remember. You have to strategize with the pitcher, with the coaches, and then you have to call a game. And there's so much for a young catcher that is really going to be overwhelming. Carter is already someone who says he deals with mental health problems. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a part of this, but the point is it's very overwhelming, and I do not think it's a coincidence that his slump lined up essentially exactly with when he had to be called on every day to play catcher. Now, recently, Salvi has returned behind the plate at least every other day, and Carter is back to playing like Carter was playing. He's gotten a hit in almost every game since then. He is having a lot better plate discipline. He looks like himself. So I really think that was a large part of that. And I hope Salvi can stay healthy so we don't have to experience that again. Now,
Yeah.
on the flip side, Salvi's defense, game planning, and overall control of the game is, in my opinion, essential to this team's success. We also have the ABS challenge stuff. He just knows the zone so much better than essentially every other catcher out there. Better than the umps, as you've said. So that's one thing, and I'm happy to have him back, and he'll be so much more valuable behind the plate. But the other thing, because everybody wants to bring up how much Salvi has struggled, I looked up the splits for how Salvi is hitting when he's catching versus how he's hitting when he's DHing. And what I found is at 21 games as a catcher this season, Salvi is slashing 253, 267, 446. That includes 2 doubles, 4 home runs, 14 strikeouts, and a 96 OPS plus, which is like, if these were his total numbers, we would be thrilled with this because it's like slightly better than what he hit last year. In 21 games as a DH this season, Salvi is hitting 160, 214, 272 with 0 doubles, 3 home runs, 24 Ks, and a 35 OPS plus. That is like extremely different. And I think what's happening there is it's hard to be a DH. People don't talk about it enough. You have to stay loose the full game and ready to bat, even though you're just sitting on a bench the whole time. And it's definitely something that Salvi is not used to doing consistently, like game after game after game, as somebody who has the most physical movement of anybody on that field on defense usually. So I really think, not to say that Salvi hasn't struggled, not to say he doesn't deserve any blame for how much he struggled. I really think this is mainly about just not being used to having to DH every day, and I do expect his numbers to get better as he has returned back behind the plate.
Yeah, and this was something that we had talked about recently, and how it does seem like he does play better, and here are the numbers that prove that he is playing better when he's catching behind the plate. And we did kind of speak about, well, what if maybe he, on days that he doesn't catch, he could do a little first base action. Like, now that we know about the groin, maybe that's part of a reason why that wasn't an option earlier in the season. But he did play first baseman for, I'd say, at least a dozen games last season. So I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him there every once in a while. Seems like there are potential solutions or things that can be tried out with this team to maybe generate a bit more offense.
Speaking of Royals struggles, the rotation used to be the best in the league. They are not that anymore. I do think Carter catching as much as he did had some effect on our starters, but I don't think it's the main thing that's happening. I think so many of them are coming off injuries from past seasons and are gonna respond a little worse to fatigue than a lot of other pitchers, especially Lugo with his age. They're really starting to struggle a bit more. Something the Royals have toyed with since spring training, and it quickly got shut down for the moment when Kolek got hurt, is a 6-man rotation. A 6-man rotation as in, instead of 5 starters who start every 5 days, you have 6 starters who start every 6 to 7 days with the breaks in there and whatnot. And you give each arm a little more time to rest and just put a lot less strain on all these people who have strain-related injuries recently. When Reagans comes back, assuming he comes back without too much of a problem in his elbow and he can get back to what he was doing before he left, I think we implement that 6-man rotation right when that happens. The risk of this is a lack of depth. If one of these guys does go down, now you don't have as many people in the minors ready to take their place because they're all pitching in the majors. But I think it's just much less likely for our starters to go down. And it's also much more likely that they have better starts because they're better rested. And I just think it's something that does not fit any team in the major leagues as much as it fits us, with our injury history, with how many talented starters we have, and the ability we have to do this and still win games just as much because we do have 6 great starters. I think it all falls into place. I think it's something they should implement. I understand the risk and why they might not, but I think it's something we should do. I even think if Reagans happened to be out for the year at some point, God forbid, but like, let's be real, it's Cole Reagans, Falter is there. You could try a 6-man with Falter, which then you're really getting risky. So like maybe just if Reagan's injury takes a little longer to rehab from, maybe then you try a Falter until Reagans can come back. At the end of the day, I don't know the exact cost-benefit analysis of having starting depth in case someone gets hurt versus having a 6-man, so we lessen the chance of people getting hurt. But my gut says a 6-man is a better idea. Speaking of pitching, and yes, on this podcast, no matter what, we will do a transition that starts with speaking of. Just get used to it. Speaking of pitching, I want to talk about baseball statistics, specifically pitching statistics, because I think a lot of people, maybe the average baseball fan, has some misconceptions about some of those statistics. I think usually if you talk to the average fan, they're going to see an ERA and they're going to make up their opinion on that pitcher based on what their ERA is. Obviously, this will vary a little, based on how many innings that pitcher's thrown, what they're expected to do, if they have a random slump, blah, 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 blah. But usually the average fan is looking at ERA. So I want to talk a little about why ERA is not the most important stat that you should look at. Fans are starting to come around to the idea of looking at OPS, OPS plus, some even looking at WRC plus on the batting side. But on the pitching side, I think it's a little rare for them to look at something called FIP. What is FIP, you ask? FIP is fielding independent pitching. This is a stat that really shows the difference between two pitchers who might have a similar or at least both a good ERA. For example, let's take Daniel Lynch IV and let's take John Schreiber. Now, I know what just happened in your head. You just had like this serene, like comfortable, exciting feeling when you heard Daniel Lynch, and you had storm clouds and rain and lightning when you heard John Schreiber. And there's a reason for that. They are, I would say, our best and worst reliever on the same team. Maybe John's not the worst. There's some competition, but they're much different. But if you look at their ERA, yes, Lynch is better significantly at a 1.96, but Schreiber looks like a solid option too at a 3.63. But if you compare their FIPS, which shows up the same way ERA does, you can read it the same way you read an earned run average, because it is essentially telling you the same thing with some stipulations. Lynch has a 2.39 FIP, while John has a whopping 6.44. Why is that? Well, FIP, as I said, is fielding independent pitching. It's a sabermetric that only measures a pitcher's performance and run prevention based on how they actually pitch and not the full result that can be affected by a bunch of other factors like fielding, leverage, ballpark factors, luck, and more. I'll put a picture up so you guys can see the equation for FIP, but there's a lot of constants and variables. You can read about it on your own time, but essentially just know that it's calculated by valuing a pitcher with how good they would be if all results and circumstances were league average. Let's look at FIP dash because it's not a completely different stat. It's more of like a companion stat. It's kind of like ERA plus, OPS plus, WRC plus, where it gives the player a rating based on how the rest of the league is pitching, where 100 is league average. Anything above 100 is worse than league average, and anything below is better than league average. Lynch and Schreiber have an almost 100-point difference on their FIP dash, where Lynch has a 58 and Schreiber has a 156. What were you saying?
No, I said woo. I said that's a huge difference.
Yeah, just a little bit. So next time you want to judge a pitcher by their ERA alone, at least consider weighing that against their FIP first.
Let me tell you something. If Danny Drip ever hits arbitration, this would be a great stat for him to pull out. I'm telling you.
Well, I think Danny Drip is done with arbitration, but he's definitely going to pull it out for an extension or,
sure,
his next team. But
it's not going to be us.
Well, you can only hope. He is probably our most, I want to say he's our most tenured pitcher, probably. If you really think about it.
Yeah, you'd have to be.
Speaking of stats, I got one more for you. We are going to play a video that I found very interesting from Brooke Knows Ball on Instagram, TikTok, and all that. Talking about a new stat to quantify clutch, to figure out how clutch a player is.
I think I found a way to change baseball forever, but more specifically, how we pay players. Okay, so here's my idea. If you want batters to start hitting situationally, you have to find a way to pay them for that. And that's exactly what I did. OPS tells you how good a hitter is, but it ignores what their hits actually do. OPS treats a solo homer and a grand slam like they're the same thing. Same 4 total bases. But baseball doesn't work like that. So here's my fix. Impact slugging. Every time you advance a runner, you get credit. Move a guy up, drive him in, create pressure, it all counts. Add up all those extra bases, cut that number in half, and add it to OPS. Now you measure how good a hitter is, along with how clutch they are when it counts.
Let's talk about it a little. So, although she didn't give an exact equation that we can use, and I would have to do way too much math and way too much data analysis and way too much all of that stuff to come up with an exact stat to apply this to OPS. What we can look at is runners advanced. So I went ahead and still did a lot of work, looked through every single play-by-play of the Royals up until May 13th, because I did this a little bit ago, and found how many runners all of our players advanced, which counts sacrifices, fielder's choices, all of that. How many players have each of our batters advanced? And I'm only looking at the people who qualify, so who have a significant amount of plate appearances. Some of these may surprise you. What players advance runners the most? In first, this one probably won't surprise you, we have Bobby with 63. In second, we have Vinny with 54. Carter with 45, Collins with 43, Salvi and Izzy are tied at 38. Michael, who, keep in mind, is our leadoff hitter, at 37, and Jack with 28. Any of that surprise you?
Well, you did mention Michael's the leadoff guy, but I would have imagined he would have been higher up on the list. But being leadoff, that makes sense. And then what I'd be curious to know is how many times Bobby advanced Michael. That I would be curious to know, because Michael, we know, he's been getting on base any which way. And but yeah, it's an interesting, little stat you pulled out here, man.
Well, don't have the answer for you, but I can tell you what I think a lot of people will be surprised by is Vinny or Isaac, because Collins has quietly been one of our best players and is an extremely underrated part of this team on offense, at least, which honestly is showing up in his batting numbers as well. But I don't think people are quick to notice just how good he has been, especially with his slow start. Vinny does not really, besides RBIs, Vinny does not really have it show up in the numbers and has struggled immensely. But as we talked about earlier this season, he's still one of the best players in the league at doing what he can to help the team, even while he's slumping. You just know, even if he's the worst batter in the league, he is never going to try to get a hit unless it's what is required of him. He's going to try to do what he has to do to get a win, which is something really admirable about Vinny.
Absolutely. That's why he's our Pasquatch, looking out for everybody in the woods and in KC.
In the woods. Austin had to go, so I'm going to finish up the rest by myself real quick. Because of seeing these runners advanced numbers, it inspired me to do a little rework of our current everyday lineup against righties. It's no secret that people get fed up with Matt Quatrero's lineups, sometimes for very valid reasons, sometimes for less valid reasons. It's all over the board, but it's very clear that we can't have our 3 and 4 hitters be some of the least productive members of our lineup forever. So I just wanted to add what I think would be a good lineup going forward based on how our players are playing right now. First, I have Michael Garcia. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. He leads the league in leadoff hits. He's been walking a little more recently. He did just have a slump against St. Louis. I don't expect it to last long. They never do for him. Second, we have Bobby Witt Jr. Third, we have Carter Jensen. Even with his recent and albeit rather large slump, he is still the second most valuable bat on the team via OPS Plus and WRC Plus this year. And speaking of that slump, it has all but been confirmed, as we talked about earlier, that his struggle was largely due to having to deal with catching and game plan duties, which he was doing every day for the first time in his career, really. Once Salvi returned behind the plate, Carter immediately started to hit again. I'm not worried about him. I think 3 would be a great spot. Originally, I had Isaac Collins at the number 3 spot, but I'll get into why I have him at 4 instead. He leads all Royals in on-base percentage besides Bobby. Even when he slumps, he still gets on base, makes productive outs, and moves runners, as we saw earlier. The reason I have him at 4 and not 3 and Carter at 4 is because he is a switch hitter. And if Carter is at the 4, then you'll see in a second we would have 3 straight lefties. Yeah, 3 straight lefties, which opens up the opportunity at any point in the game for the opposing manager to bring in a lefty specialist to face all 3 of our lefties. And then if that's early in the game, then we're not going to be able to pinch hit just yet, because that's not really how we do it. If it's later in the game, then we can pinch hit, but obviously our righties are weaker than our lefties, and a lot of these guys you don't really want to take out of the game because they're game changers. So because of that, I have Isaac Collins separating Carter from the next guy, from the next two batters, which are lefties. And I think this makes more sense because of that. I know in the 4 spot, a lot of times you want power. Even though Isaac has some kind of like quiet pop, he's obviously not a power hitter. But if you look at our lineup and you see who's in the 9 spot, you can almost treat the 9 spot as like a new leadoff. And really, the power spot is the 3 in what I'm putting together here, and that's Carter. So I think it works out. After Isaac at number 5, we have Jack Caglione. Jack has had an interesting year. He jumps around from being the most productive and clutch player in the lineup to striking out 5 times a game, but overall is really coming into his own and has thrived with runners on base recently. Getting moved in the lineup a bit, he has runners on for him more often. On top of that, I just think Jack is improving every day, and I really think he'll reach a new level by the trade deadline. After him, at 6, I have the Pasquatch, Vinny Pasquantino. Do I think he'll snap out of his so far year-long season slump? Yes. Do I think that will be this month? Not really. I don't see it. I think it's going to take a little longer this year. He usually has a slow start, but for him to get back to the Vinny that we know and love, I think it's going to take a little longer. I just do. Does he lead the team in RBIs besides Bobby? Yes. And advance the second most runners, as we discussed. However, I think this is largely due to how consistently Izzy, Michael, and Bobby get on base before him, more than him being that productive. And like I said, Vinny will do whatever he can to help the team win, and that's why he's able to get these RBIs. But I do think it has more to do this season just because of how poorly Vinny is hit with who is in front of him. Still, he's very valuable to this lineup, and I welcome him coming back to the 3 spot when he shows us the Vinny of the last 2 years again. Next up, we have Salvador Perez. Similar to Vinny, I think the captain will snap out of his slump. Even though I think his struggle has more to do with age than his first base counterpart, Salvi is declining. That just happens when you get in your late 30s as a baseball player, especially as a catcher. But as we talked about, I think it has a little more to do with the fact that he was DHing every day. I do expect him to snap out of it. At the end of the day, the Royals have the least valuable 3 and 4 hitters by offensive WAR in the league. So let's win now and put our stars back in the 3 and 4 spots when they start playing like stars again. I think they'll be okay with it. I really do. And it takes the pressure off of them to snap out of their slump now. At 8, I have Michael Massey / Nick Lofton. Against righties, I really do trust Massey to be more consistently productive going forward. And conversely, I think Lofton will probably calm down a bit on his success. Like, let's face it, he often does. So I have both of them here mainly because Massey is hitting below 60 on the road for his batting average. So, like, on the road at least, I wouldn't mind putting Lofton in there to start road games. But in general, Massey's defense is worlds better. I do like what he's doing at home against righties, so I'd like Massey in there more against righties. And then last, we have Kyle Isbell. It's, again, that if it ain't broke, don't fix it thing. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is the 9 spot can be super valuable because they come up right before your best hitters, in this case, Michael and Bobby. And this year specifically makes more sense for Izzy to be in the 9 spot than it ever has, because Izzy is having a breakout season. He's getting on base so much more. He's slugging so much more. His batting average is much better. And I think he's even kind of starting to show Q that he can hold his own against lefties. So we'll kind of see what Q does with that, but this is a brand new Kyle Isbell. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And he rounds out what I think would be a really productive lineup for the Royals going forward. Now, does lineup order fix everything? No. Does it even fix most of the problems? Not necessarily. It's just a really good start, and we got to stop putting some of our worst hitters currently at the top of the lineup, in my opinion. That'll do it for this week's podcast. We were going to do a segment about picking a WNBA team to root for. That was going to be kind of fun and have a lot of, fun little aspects to it. We ran out of time, unfortunately. My co-host is very busy, so we are going to do that in a separate video that will probably come out later this week. But appreciate you if you're watching on YouTube. Appreciate you if you're an audio listener. Be sure to engage with us, whether you agree with our opinions, whether you hate our opinions. Let us know what you think. We will probably respond to you, as is not too hard to do. And we'll see you next week.